So, chapter 2 is about the family and history. Monogamy is a relationship where between two partners, whereas polygamy is a relationship that involves multiple partners. Polygamy relationships are when all partners involved in said relationship agree to having more than one partner, and monogamy relationships are where both partners agree to only have or agree to only have a relationship with each other. And choice plays a role because you're allowed to choose what kind of relationship you want. You just have to make sure that your partner or partners are also wanting the same thing. The textbook says that monogamy is common among humans, and because it has existed for so long, most people believe it is a natural way for human relationships to go. But polygamy relationships were actually the most common form of marriage throughout human history. An example that I know of a polygamous relationship would be one of my old coworkers. They were in a relationship with two other people, and they said it worked really well for them, and they were all very happy together. A celebrity couple that I know that was in a polygamous relationship would be Bella Thorne, Matza, and Tana Mojo. They are no longer together, but they were all in a relationship together at one point. Personally, I prefer monogamous relationships, but I can understand and respect polyamorous relationships, and I think people should do whatever makes them happy so long as it is consensual and not hurting themselves or others. The three interrelated groups that the textbook mentions are the American Indians, white Europeans, and African Americans. American Indians had a very tight familial bond, and family was basically the building blocks of their lives. The text says that they followed a matrilineal descent, which basically said that people were descendants of their mothers instead of their fathers, and most of them practiced monogamous relationships or marriages, and they also practiced a gender division of labor, meaning that men did the hunting and women grew and prepared food and took care of the children. But with all that being said, American Indians still considered men and women to be very equal. White Europeans had a bit of a different outlook on things compared to the rest. Their marriage was a practical arrangement instead of for love. Women had very little choice and were basically considered to be property of their husbands. And the text says that brides were even shipped in for the male settlers in hopes to calm them down because they were kind of being crazy. And it also says that husbands were actually more likely to get in trouble for not keeping their wives under control than they would be for abusing them. White Europeans' children were looked at in a Calvinist view, which basically was saying that they were guilty of sin from birth and that harsh discipline and hard labor was the only way to rid them of that. They played an economic role in their families. The text says that they basically had no childhood and were used for labor. African American family life was viciously altered due to slavery, and most did not have their own name, only a given name, which made it basically impossible to form family lineages. The text says that African American families, most of them married young and had families at a young age, and the children would live with both parents even into adulthood. The text says that slave marriages and parenthood were not legally recognized by the states, but unfortunately, we don't know how much of American family life was a result of slavery. The textbook also says about American Indians that they had a strong respect for their elders and that their view of family extended past just biological, but it also included people in their community. And the text displays white Europeans as very unloving. It seems all they really cared about was their economic gain. For African Americans, the textbook tells us that slaves would live in their families for their entire lives, and they would live on large farms because it made it easier to form protection and to form communities. And it also made it easier for those who were married, for the husbands and wives to stay together. The family structures of American Indians is still pretty similar today. In fact, most cultures have adopted this kind of family view. White Europeans have shifted to a more family-based view, and they no longer view their children as evil. They view them as innocent and in need of nurturing and protection. African American families now have a stronger extended family view. Personally, I feel like my family mirrored American Indians' views or white Europeans' views today. We're a very family-oriented, loving family, and my mother was a single mother of 5, so she really had to rely on family and close friends in the community to help raise us 5 kids so she could work full-time to provide for us. Companionate marriage is the view that marriage is full of companionship, friendship, and romance as opposed to being simply practical. This type of marriage was most appealing and benefited younger people as they no longer were having to go through their parents. It gave us dating and it gave us family wages. The textbook says that this benefited men working in white-collar corporate jobs the most, and it also says that it ended courtship. The text states that men who were employed and were wanting to support a homemaking wife in their own homes were the type of relationships that thrived from this type of marriage. This kind of relationship was attractive to a lot of people for very good reasons. It allowed men to initiate and pay for dates instead of relying on parents to set it up. It gave people the opportunity to actually be in love instead of being forced to be together. And I think it's the ideal type of relationship personally. I think it's very appealing, and I think, especially to those who are looking for a loving relationship, and I think it's something that most people strive for. I think most relationships are like this, and personally, I think my own relationship is companionate. My boyfriend and I are best friends, and in a very loving, beneficial relationship. Even though I do have my own job and do provide for myself as well. The marriage today is definitely at a decline compared to the past. While companionate marriage is still alive, it is not as common anymore since women now have more independence and are working more. Women are not getting married later in life after living independently and establishing a life for themselves. The textbook states that women's paid work is one of the reasons that marriage is at a decline today, and the text actually says that that's one of the weaknesses of companionate marriage. More and more people are not following the traditional life path that we once had. They're not getting married at a young age. They're not having children at a young age. They're living alone later in life. They're getting married later in life. If even getting married at all, and having children out of wedlock, which was super unheard of. And divorce is actually more common when that used to not be a thing. When it comes to choosing a last name, I think that women are choosing to either hyphenate their names or stick with their maiden name. A lot of thought and effort goes into choosing a last name, and I know this because I was married and I thought long and hard about choosing what last name I was going to take before I decided to not take my husband's name, which I'm a little grateful that I did because I actually ended up filing for divorce about a year and a half later. But it's a very big decision to change your last name because it becomes your identity. So I think a lot of people are choosing to keep, a lot of women in particular, choosing to keep their maiden name because they've already established a name for themselves with it. But it's still very common for women to take their husband's last name. But I do think that it is a big deal and something that you should really think about before doing. Personally, if I get married again, I probably will take my husband's last name as I don't really want to be associated with my father's side of the family. But it is something that you definitely need to think about and make sure that it's the right choice for you. But yeah, that basically sums up what chapter 2 is about. Thank you so much for watching.